Hey gang, Randy from Break and Run Billiards. Today we're going to do basically a primer on pool cues and on tables. Pool cues can cost anywhere from $59, even I have seen some for $39, all the way up to $15,000. Now, is there a difference between a $39 pool cue and a $15,000 pool cue? Yeah, there's a world of difference. Will the $15,000 pool cue make you play better? Maybe slightly, but really no. If you have a good stroke and a good mental game, you can play with pretty much anything. Now, good equipment will make it a little bit more consistent and you will have a little bit more quality play. But Mike Siegel once said that Efren Reyes could shoot with a tree branch and beat almost anybody in the league. And that's probably true. I don't doubt he could go to any pool hall in America, grab a cue off of the rack, and probably just beat the snot out of just about everybody that stepped up there. He's that good. But we want to have something that's quality made, that's going to have a reliable repeatability and feels good in our hand and gives us confidence. So I think Jerry Brysath one time said that once you get up to $150, $200, there's probably not a huge difference in pool cues. It goes more into the decoration and some of the technology. There are pool cues where they actually turn the wood into a cylinder, cut the wood, and then re-glue it together in different directions so that it won't warp. And Viking, which I use, they actually will get their wood and they'll cut out 1-inch squares that'll be 40 inches long, and they will set them in a drying rack, and every couple days they'll turn them. And they'll do this for a year before they actually turn a shaft. Because once the wood is seasoned and all the water's out of it, there's a very low probability that they'll warp. So once you get into the quality manufacturers, the name brand manufacturers, they're going to stand behind their product and they're going to make something that you can use and reliably use. If you're going to Kmart and you buy their $39 cue, it's probably going to be fiberglass. It's going to sound weird. The ferrule might come off because it's not glued on right. We don't want those problems. We want a good solid stick that's going to last for years. I bought this Viking 13 years ago, and I've changed the shaft. This is the third shaft I have, but it had nothing to do that the shaft wasn't any good. It was more like some of the technology changed, and I just wanted to move in that direction. So that's the first part of this. The second part of what we go into cues is what are the differences in the shafts. If you buy a shaft online and it's just a generic, it could be a McDermott, it could be a Viking, it could be a Predator, any of the ones that are out there. Standard shaft will have a 13 millimeter tip on it. That's slightly more than a 1/2 inch. And that's fine. You can get them down to 11.75 millimeters. The shafts also come, the wooden shafts come with what they call regular deflection, low deflection, and no deflection. Now, no deflection was kind of the newest thing they've come out with. When you take these wood shafts like what I have here on this Predator, the wood shaft, when you strike the ball, it has some flex. If it's really stiff, what it's going to do when you hit this cue ball, if you hit it off center, it's going to deflect to the opposite direction of what you're hitting the ball. So if I'm hitting this ball with like one tip of English, it's going to deflect off to the left. If you get a low deflection shaft and do the same thing, and I put one tip of right English, that deflection is less because the shaft will bend and prevent it from pushing that ball over as far as it is with a regular shaft. When they go to no deflection shafts, well, let me back up. When you have a low deflection shaft, or how they got that is they drilled a hole down this, and it could be 3, 4, 8 inches, depends on what the manufacturer's engineers were thinking. And that was what they did for low deflection. Then they started filling these with foam and stuff, and they found out that they were getting even less deflection when they did that. So that's what the low deflection is. Now, are they truly low deflection? I think most people will tell you there's no such thing as a no deflection shaft. If you're going to hit something off center, it's going to move to the opposite direction. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you were to look at this shaft, which you probably can't see there, from this ferrule all the way back to this joint, this taper is constantly increasing until it gets here. So it's kind of a linear taper. This shaft, which is carbon fiber, but there's wood ones that are like this. This has what they call a pro taper. From here to about 16 to 18 inches, it is all the same width. And then it starts tapering up to the joint. Now, is there an advantage to a pro taper to the other taper? Probably not much of any. It's just what feels good in your hand. If you use a closed bridge, which we'll get to in a couple episodes here, you'll have the same amount of stick running through your finger. So that could make a difference. You're going to get less drag as you're shooting. If you have an open bridge, it probably doesn't make any difference. I personally like the Pro Taper, but it's only because I like the Pro Taper. There isn't any basis really for me using it. I mean, for years I used a regular pool stick and never thought anything different. Now, what manufacturers did, they started going to carbon fiber. Carbon fiber is lighter and it doesn't ding. These wooden shafts, you move them around, they fall on the floor, you get people bumping into them. They get these little nicks in them and it's annoying. And you're constantly sanding them or rubbing out the chalk. When you get these tables, when you are in a pool hall, they don't get cleaned that much. And if you're in a bar, they never get cleaned. And you could, by the end of the night, if you've played a few games, your hands will be covered with chalk. And if you're putting your hand on this shaft, all that chalk is coming off on this wood. Wood's got pores in it, and maybe the little bit of sweat in your hand or the humidity is going to open those pores a little bit, and this chalk is going to get in there and it won't wipe off. So carbon fiber doesn't do that. When I had all wood shafts, usually once every other week I was going through and taking a pad and getting as much chalk off this as I could, and then taking a leather pad and smoothing it out. When I got the carbon fiber, basically I just wipe it down once a week, and that's all I have to do. Now, there is a few of these out there. This is a Viking, they call it Exact Shot. This is a carbon core. They actually took a piece of carbon and they made an X pattern out of it, and it's circular in the center, but it has these wings that come out. And then they took wood and cut it so it fit into those grooves. And this was their answer to the carbon fiber shaft, because when carbon fiber shafts came out, there were some issues with them. They sounded like they were a pipe. You were hitting a pipe and you heard that echo going through, and because the carbon fiber is hollow, they eventually started filling those with foam and stuff, and that prevents that pinging sound that you would get from the older shafts. So a lot of people didn't like the original carbon fiber shafts. And this was Viking's answer. The problem I had with this is when we talked about wood and chalk, it still had the wood that gathered the chalk, but the chalk would build up on these lines where the carbon fiber comes there, and it would feel like the wood was recessing down there. It was just a chalk building up there on the carbon fiber ends. And so I had to wipe those down all the time and clean those. And once I cleaned them, they were perfectly smooth. But once they got a little bit chalky, they were annoying in your hand. They still work pretty good. Well, carbon fiber, when they went to this, I don't know if anybody out there remembers when they started introducing graphite shafts on golf clubs. When graphite shafts come out, everybody says, wow, this is going to be great. I can get 20 or 30 yards extra on my drive. The problem with that was they also got 20, 30, 40 degrees more arc in their slice or their hook, because the graphite shaft, when it slingshotted through, it was amplifying all the errors. The carbon fiber shaft does that too. If you don't have a good quality stroke, it's going to get you in trouble. It doesn't, the spin, you get more spin out of these than you do out of the wood shafts. So you have to work with these for a lot of hours to understand how those shafts are actually working. So I would recommend, if you are a new player, get an inexpensive cue and get used to playing. And then if you're going to stick around and play for a long time, think about carbon fiber down the line. I probably wouldn't advise getting that until, if you're in the APA, until you get to be a good 4 or a 5. If you are in the BCA or you got a Fargo rate, if you've got a Fargo rate probably around 440 or above, that's when I would think about looking at a carbon fiber shaft. But be aware that you're going to have to spend a lot of time figuring out the shots you already have, how you're going to do them once you do that. And then once you go in that direction, I would say commit to it for at least a year. If you don't like it after a year, then go back. But it takes so long to get used to that shaft that you can't go back and forth between them, because then you're going to ruin your game on both shafts. So that's the basics on the cues. Now these two cues I'll add, these are weighted, and I can take off the back and I can take out weights. I can make them lighter or I can make them heavier. Is that an asset or not? I don't know. You get a cue made by your local cue maker, it's probably not going to be weighted. They're going to put it on the lathe, and they might add some weight to it to get it into a range, but you're going to pretty much get what it is. And they're going to be pretty close to 19 ounces. That's the general size or weight of a cue when you buy one. You're going to be pretty close to that, but you're not going to be able to vary that. Do you need to vary it? I thought when I bought this, a 21 ounce Viking, I said, well, if I don't like it that heavy, I'll take weight out. Here it is 13 years later. I have taken the back off, and the only reason I did was because the actual weights were coming loose and I could feel them moving on the inside, so I had to tighten them up. Same with the brake cue. I've never even looked at the weights on that. So that's the cues, and that's just a primer. If you want to see what cues do and you want to look at deflection, go see Dr. Dave Elticor at Billiard University. He has got thousands of videos where he does high-speed recording of stuff, and he shows you what these cues are actually doing. So that's where I get that information from. So with that being said, the next thing we're going to basically talk about is pool tables. You go to a bar, and generally you get two types of pool tables in a bar. You get bar boxes, which are about 6 foot in length and 3 foot wide, or 6.5 foot by 3.25 feet wide. They're small, and I actually find them harder to play on. Or you'll get a 7 foot table. But in the bars, the bar tables are generally leased. Some bars own their tables and they take maybe a little bit better care of them. But most bars lease these tables from somebody that owns it, and they've made a deal with them where they'll split the amount of money that comes in. So to maximize that money, the person that owns those does very little maintenance on them. I've gone in there and the pockets were falling off and the felt might be torn. Though these tables might be old enough where the bumpers could be really hard because they're so old, or they could be actually falling apart on the inside where the rubber actually degrades. And you hit a ball and that ball basically just goes thump and it stops and maybe backs up 3 inches, or you want to hit a bank shot and you hit it in one direction and it goes a totally different direction. Those are going to be the problems you have with old unmaintained tables. You go to a pool hall, generally the tables are maintained at least to a minimum standard. You know, they get recovered on a regular basis. The maintenance is done on a regular basis. But I recommend anytime you're going to play a match, and what I notice is on pool nights, people will come in and the first thing they do is rack up a rack of balls and they just shoot. And I'm going, well, why don't you figure out what the table is? Is it playing short? Is it playing long? Humidity can affect a table. If it's unbalanced, that could make table roll. So generally, when I come up before I play match, and I'm just goofing off, maybe I'll put a ball right in front of this pocket, and I'll aim just short of this point on the side pocket, and it should come pretty close to going into the corner pocket over there. I'll shoot from this pocket at this second diamond. It should come into this side pocket here. And there's some other stuff we'll learn later, but see what the table feels like. Hit some bank shots, hit some kick shots, just to see how the ball rolls off the table. Hit a ball down the rail and see if it stays true all the way to the pocket, or as it gets there, does it fade inside. If it fades inside, you know you can't hit pocket speeds. You might need to hit something a little faster to make sure that it overcomes the table roll. So those are the things you want to do, as well as get your shot down, get your muscle memory flowing while you're out there preparing. You're not going to do that if you play a game. Get out there and shoot some balls into a pocket, and even it could be a straight in shot. Get this motion going right. And when we get into the next video, we're going to start talking about what I call the natural stroke. And that's something that I've only heard one person really ever talk about this. I haven't heard an instructor talk about it. There's no YouTube videos on this. We want to get a natural stroke. And before a match, we want to have that dialed in so that we start playing good pool in the very first game. There's a lot of players out there, and that's me included. When I go and play, sometimes I don't feel comfortable until the second or the third game. If I'm playing a lower handicap person, that's too far down the road. I can't wait. I've got to start playing right away. So we need to get that muscle memory going. as quick as we can. And before a match is the best time to do that. All right, that's the pool cue and the pool table primer. We're going to talk more about this stuff later. So thank you for watching. I'm Randy, Break and Run Billiards. You got any questions, shoot me a text, an email, something. And we'll see you later.